Hey y'all, so we are in the last video. Wonderful. So let's talk about the Plan B pill. I had told myself that I was gonna stop taking it because I had began feeling like, oh, it was basically the abortion pill. I had one pill remaining. I hadn't opened it. I just threw it away. Okay, I recall one night, Marcus was not sober and he was just standing beside my bed with a crazy look in his eyes and he was holding a pocket knife. He was still upset about what had happened with Chris. And he was saying some very scary things. So I was just really concerned for my safety. And I was just trying to distract him and take his mind off of the thoughts he was having. So I initiated sexual activity with him just to distract him. But that kind of didn't work for long. He fell asleep. And then when he woke up, well, actually, I woke up to feeling him punching my stomach, and I opened my eyes and I just saw him sitting on the edge of the bed looking at my phone. And I don't even recall what he was saying, but all I remember was thinking, I cannot have a kid with this guy because he usually pulled out, but that night he did not. So I was like, I can't have a kid with this guy. I can't be stuck with him forever. So I went into the trash, I pulled out the Plan B and I took it. I'm just taking a deep breath thinking about the fact that I went through these things. There was another night when he had been drinking and maybe also doing drugs. I don't know, but he definitely was not sober. He and I had been arguing and he was threatening me and I did feel threatened. And I was just like, man, I just need to get out the house. I felt like if I wasn't in the house with him, then he wouldn't hurt me. And there were just a lot of days when I felt like any moment with him could be my last moment alive. So I just stepped outside of the apartment. But he followed me out and, us being outside didn't stop him from acting crazy. He put a lit cigar to my face. And I was just trying with all of my strength to push his arm away. He was a very skinny, wiry person, but he was really strong. Later on, he told me that he wasn't going to burn me. He just wanted to scare me. And, for a while I thought, well, if he did want to burn me, he could have because he was stronger. But he put his arm down, he wasn't trying to burn me anymore. And I was just knocking on the neighbor's door, Fred actually, who I mentioned in the last video, but no one was coming to the door. And Marcus, he just began asking me to come inside the apartment and I would not because I did not want to be alone with him. He went inside for a moment and he came back out completely undressed. And I didn't expect that at all. And I was just like, why are you naked? Someone's going to see you. But he said he didn't care. He just kept on urging me to come back inside. Later, he told me that he hoped by being undressed, I would come inside. But I wasn't going to re-enter the house anytime soon. And then we heard Fred's door open. And Marcus ran into the bushes. And Fred and his wife just, seemed a little startled to see me standing there. And we heard a sound in the bushes and Fred was like, what is that? And I was like, well, it's Marcus. And then Fred was like, okay, I'm not even going to say what he said. I'm just going to put it on the screen. And I'll put Marcus's response as well. And then, Fred's wife saw Marcus naked and she asked me if I was okay. And I said I was. I just went into the house and I got my phone and the car keys. And I just grabbed Marcus some pants as well. And as I was walking back out the front door, he was walking inside. And I was just like, Marcus, I brought you some pants, And he just started to embrace me. But there was a knock on the door. And Marcus moved aside so that I could answer it. It was Fred and his wife. And then I just told them that I was fine. And I hurried past them. I kind of hurried to my car. And then I just drove to a Walmart parking lot because I was like, I just don't want to stay at the house tonight at all. And then I called Chris and I told him what happened. I was just a really silly girl, who thought that he and I were just friends, even after sleeping with them. And Chris said that I could go to his home that night, but I did not. I just slept in the Walmart parking lot. And Marcus kept calling and texting me saying that he was sorry and that he wanted me to return, but I told him I was not going to return that night. The next morning, I drove back home. Marcus was sober and he was just getting ready for work. He told me that he didn't want to be with me. I had been out all night and he probably assumed that I had spent the night at Chris's. I was still going through Marcus's phone. Went through his phone again and saw that he had been texting Chris. He had threatened to stab Chris's mother and son. That's literally what he put in the text message. And he has made videos before where he was saying that, you know, he'd stab people's kids. And again, I'm reminded of when he just had his knife out one day around my little niece, saying that some kids die young and some live to grow old. And I remember, you know, he had verbally stated one day to his friend that, you know, he would slap kids and hit women. Friend didn't really respond. He's admitted to having hit women before, you know, saying that we deserve it. Well, I guess I came to my senses when it came to Chris. I blocked his number and blocked him on social media, but then he began calling me from hidden numbers. Like, he called me back to back 12 to 15 times each time he called. There was one morning, you know, I was driving ride sharing those days, and I would start driving early. And there was one morning when Chris, you know, was calling me at like 4 or 5 a.m. And I was just laying in the bed beside Marcus. And I didn't answer, but Marcus again told me to change my number. So I did change my number. I was reluctant to at first because I was like, man, I have to change my number with everything. I just felt like it was going to be a lot of work. And then, you know, I had other social media pages where I would just share my hobbies. And then Chris began writing me on those pages and his messages until he wrote that he was thinking about pressing charges on Marcus for threatening, you know, for threatening to stab his mother and son. And I just responded and I apologized, you know, for what Marcus had said to him. And I told him I was working on my relationship with Marcus. And then he was just like, is that what God would want for you? Then I blocked him from that page. And I showed Marcus the messages because I was trying to be open with him. I remember, like, I wanted us to do couples counseling. And he had agreed, but on the day that we were supposed to go, he did not, you know, want to go. He had changed his mind. And he ended up wanting to go back to the shed. So I took him back, and, you know, I was going through my phone the other day just deleting stuff, and I saw like an old message from him during that time that I will go ahead and share. You know, I would miss him when he was gone, but I was just free to do things. Like, I could visit any church I wanted to visit. He would say that I always wanted to visit white people churches. And I was like, well, you know, you can visit any church you want. But he would say, well, we only have one car, so we have to go to the same church. And I would try to like watch self-help stuff online, and he would just like laugh at me about it. Even though he would watch self-help stuff as well. He would watch toxic stuff though. And I'm so glad I don't have to listen to that stuff anymore. Y'all, I also remember there was a song I like to listen to. I still do. It's called Black, White, Tan by Nicole Mullen. And it's basically about interracial marriage and biracial children. And he would just say that that song made him want to vomit. But I like Nicole Mullen. I like the song. Now I can just listen to it all the time without anybody bothering me about it. Mama looks like coffee, daddy looks like cream. Baby is a mocha drop, American dream. But y'all, what did Marcus do? Marcus returned. And he was living at the apartment again. By this time, it is November. Praise Jesus. Chris is completely out of the picture. And it is Thanksgiving. We drove to my family's house. And I enjoyed watching him with my nieces and nephews. I always enjoyed watching him with them. And I was proud of him for not smoking weed with one of my family members, even though there was a huge bag. He said he was just gonna drink a beer with my dad. And I was like, okay, sounds cool. And he and I were broke. We barely had the money or even the energy to drive to my parents' house. But we decided that we would go and we were just gonna sleep in the car, you know, because we like sleeping in the car. It's comfortable. And I still sleep in my car sometimes. But what did my father do? My father bought us a hotel room. He thought he was doing a good thing. And I tried to be respectful, so I thanked him. I'm not sure why my parents so badly wanted to see us in a hotel room. But they got us in a hotel room in July and they got us in a hotel room in November. I just know when I meet my spouse, I will not be in a hotel room with him alone when we're not married. But he and I argued that night and I ended up sleeping in the car anyway, outside of the hotel room. So we got back home and I remember his mother called him one day. She was riding in the car with his ex-girlfriends and his mother wasn't aware that he was at our apartment. He just kind of told me to be silent while she spoke. He had her on speaker and his mother was talking about how his ex-girlfriend was just, spending some time at her house. And then she threw in, "She's sleeping in your bed, Marcus," which was a very perverted thing to say. Why would she want her son to even picture that? And later she called him again, trying to give him some advice, but it just sounded very toxic, telling him he needed to change his body to become what his ex-girlfriend wanted in a man. I remember there was one day in January when he and I, we were just going to watch a movie. I was just like, hold on, just let me shower first. And as I was in the shower, he just took the car keys and he left. And I was just like so upset that he took my car and that he just left. And I had blocked and deleted his mother's number months and months ago. So I didn't have her number, but I called her on Facebook Messenger. So I called her a couple times and I was just gonna be like, "Can you tell your son to get back here with my car?" So I was not wanting to call the cops on him. I think I was just over calling the cops at that point. I was like, this situation doesn't warrant it. And also, I'm just tired of calling the cops on him. First, I had called him and I'm like, "Why did you take the car and leave?" And he was like, "Okay, I'll just put it on the screen." And he was like, "'Cause I'm a man." I guess he was still trying to prove that to himself. It reminds me of July 2021, when he left because I had locked him out the house because he had been sleeping with a prostitute and using drugs. And he was talking with his mother and he was like, I paid for drugs and a hooker. I am a man." And she was like, "Yes, you are." And there's just something really wrong with that. You don't pay people for sex just to prove that you're a man. It's actually a pretty sad thing. You don't sleep with people to prove you're a man. You don't affirm your son's manhood just by saying, "Yes, you are a man." I understand why you did that. I just feel like if you're so aroused or so broken that you have to pay for sex, you just really need to get some help. But he had the same problem my ex-husband did. My ex-spouse was really perverted. And, as I reflect on my relationship with Marcus, he was perverted as well. I mean, he was literally reaching out to people trying to do porn. But yeah, I called his mother, a couple times and she didn't answer. I just want her to just call him up to be like, "Bring the car back." So, he stopped answering. He actually blocked me. Either he blocked me or he turned his phone off. All I could do was just wait for him to return in the car. So, again, it's January 2021. I am just doing rideshare when I have the energy and the will to do it. I'm behind on the rent, but I knew I wasn't going to be behind for long because I was going to start a new career soon. And also I had some assistants in place and it just really felt like the Carrie season was ending. That place just didn't feel like home anymore. And the favor there had dried up. And as I think about that place, y'all, I just remember, when we first moved there, spiritually, it felt really well in the home. But as time passed, it started feeling more and more in spiritual decline. And mostly in my room where the sin would happen most of the time. And I've been watching John Bevere a little bit, and he said that, he spoke with Jim Bakker, who, preaches the word of God. He used to be really big. And, it came out that Jim Bakker was doing some ungodly things. And John Bevere said, "Did you stop loving God?" And Jim Bakker told him, "I loved God the entire time that I was doing that. I just didn't fear God." And that's something I've been thinking about. I was like, I think maybe I didn't fear God, because if I did, I would not have been sleeping with someone I wasn't married to. It also reminds me of when my brother called me up about the fornication one day. He was like, "Ashley, you're playing with the fire of the Holy Spirit and with the fires of hell." And he was right. But I could not shake Marcus. I loved him. I was crazy about him, even though he was literally making me crazy. And I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but I would have headaches when it came to Marcus. When I'd be in his presence, I just have headaches. When I was dating him, and I was like, why am I having headaches? Like, it just didn't make sense. And I even saw a neurologist, and I got an MRI. And praise Jesus, the MRI was normal. The headaches, they stopped when I left him completely. There was one day, and I'll talk about it later, when I called him up, after we were breaking up, I just called him up. And we weren't like even in the same city, but just talking to him on the phone made the headache come back. So there was just something really spiritual happening there. I told him about the headaches, and he just thought I was being a hypochondriac. But yep, I would have headaches, and I would also feel like I was in a daze, like I wasn't awake. But when I left him, it's like as soon as I left that city, I felt awake. But y'all, getting back, I was saying that I was behind on the rent, but I had something in place and I was going to start a career soon. But, it felt like, the time is just up for being here. I really wanted to place in Apex. And he was like, "Well, actually, you're going to have to put my name on the lease and give me a copy of the key." And I was like, "I really want to, but I'm concerned that you and Trey will be up to no good. You're going to have him over and y'all will be up to no good again." And he was saying that he was not going to have Trey over. He would continue to like mess with the locks on the window. He would like unlock the windows, and he would like take the screen off of his bedroom door. I'm sorry, he would take the screen off of his bedroom window, and I would just lock the windows and everything back. But I think what got me one day was I was just leaving one morning to head to the gym, and I saw the little lock on the door had been tampered with. And I'll just put in a clip of what I saw. I actually recorded myself just trying to like lock and close the door, but it would just never fully shut. So he had did something to the lock, and that just really scared me. So instead of just going to the gym that morning, I just stayed home, and it was a very awkward morning. I wasn't myself, and I think he felt that. So I was dropping him off at work. He and I wasn't speaking on the way there. Everything was awkward. No hug or kiss goodbye, no have a great day. And immediately after I dropped him off, I was just like, I called my aunt up and I told her what he had did to the locks. I was like, should I just get another roommate? Should I just move in with somebody like immediately? She told me to move in with my brother. And so I spent the whole day doing that, just selling some items, packing, the things that were very, very special to me. I was just in survival mode, He was texting, saying he needed to talk to me. He was calling me. He was like, "What are you doing?" But I was just in a panic. I just turned in the apartment keys. And then he called me at like 5:30. I ignored his call and I just texted him. I was like, I'm leaving. I put your things on the back porch. And I surrendered the apartment and then I blocked him because fear. And so I just stayed the night in a Walmart parking lot. I remember my car was just filled with things. I could not stretch out. I was just very uncomfortable that night. But I thought to myself, well, now I don't have to feel afraid anymore. But that was not true. I would still feel afraid of him no matter where I was. The fear actually only stopped recently. And I still desired like his body for a really long time. Even the next morning, you know, in the Walmart parking lot, waking up, about to make the drive to my brother's house. It's like my mouth was desiring his body. Like not even my body was desiring it. It was like my mouth was craving his body. And I was like, I had never felt that way. And then I just remember saying out loud, Lord, I've got to stop lusting over this man. But everything, you know, was just amplified. The sexual attraction was amplified. The way I just loved him was amplified. And, you know, I just really believed in him as well. I do praise God that I don't desire anything about him anymore. So it felt right to be away from him, but it didn't feel right to be where I was geographically. And I was miserable, you know, for the 6 months. I was in an area I didn't want to be in. And I felt pressure to remain there. I think my siblings were just afraid that I would return, you know, to Marcus. He and I would talk on the phone sometimes. I remember he asked me if I missed him. And I told him, you know, I miss having a man. Because I did not miss everything that came with him. I did not miss the fear. I did not miss the psychological abuse. And I did not miss hearing about how much he hated, despised white people. But I missed his masculine energy. That's what I missed most of all. And yeah, sometimes I missed his body. And I continued to think about him every day. And he called, like one day he was like, I think about you all the time, Ash. And I was like, I didn't tell him this immediately, but I was like, I think about him, like I was thinking about him all the time. And there was a day when I heard like his name in my mind like 3 times. Like it said, Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. And I told my sister about it. And she was like, rebuke that in every form of witchcraft. And, you know, because I was still thinking about him so much, I was like, Lord, if it be your perfect will, please remove him from my heart. But if it's not your will, please let me continue to love him. And I would go back and forth between where I was and where I wanted to be. And my dad would call me up sometimes and he would be like, have you been talking to that boy? I'm like, no, I have not been talking to him. He doesn't know I'm here. And my dad was like, well, I have a bad feeling about him. Don't talk to him. But yep, y'all. So, yep, he and I would still talk on the phone sometimes. Sometimes I'd be afraid to take his calls, you know, but I would still take them. I would just be like, man, I'm afraid that he can find me no matter where I am. So sometimes I just took his calls to appease him. And sometimes I called him up just to ask him if he needed funds, because sometimes I'd be concerned about him. Other times I'm like, well, maybe if I'm kind to him, he won't hurt me. If he saw me anywhere. And there was one day when he was just writing me on social media and he was like, oh, I'm angry and I'm hurt by the things you did, but I'm sorry for everything I did to you. I don't want you to take what I did out on a good person. And I recall he asked me one day, you know, if I was pregnant, and I just kidded and I told him I was. And he was like, basically he was saying, don't play like that, because you've always said that, you know, if you got pregnant by me, you would leave. And I did tell him that a couple times, because he would be like, you know, when his son turns 14, he's going to buy his son a prostitute because he didn't want his sons to remain virgins for long. And I didn't want anybody defiling my son's bodies. So I told him that, you know, I did tell him a couple times, you know, if I get pregnant by you, I'm taking the kid and I'm leaving. I never really, okay, I did mean that. But I never thought that I would actually get to that point, because I always felt like, you know, he was going to become a man of God. But then I told him, yes, I'm just kidding. I'm not pregnant. And y'all, I remember there was a day a lady was just peeking through the window. I had, you know, the blinds open so that, you know, sunshine could come in. I could see the flowers. And there was a lady just peeking through, and I got startled. And I was like, part of me was like, oh my gosh, is that Marcus's people? Because I was, again, afraid that he would find me no matter where I was. And then I Googled, when do DV victims stop feeling afraid? I have my days when I just wanted people to hang out with, you know, somebody to go to the movies with. And I remember I was talking to him one day, and I told him I wanted to go to the movies. And he was like, well, let's go. But I didn't have any funds, and neither did he, so we did not hang out. And then there was another time when he was saying, oh, I could get us a hotel. You know, he was saying that he could get us a hotel. And I told him I was never sleeping with him ever again. Whether or not this flesh wanted to, I just did not feel safe with him. I could not be in a hotel room with him alone. I didn't know if I would come out of there alive. And there was one day when he said that, oh, he lost his knife, but that he had gotten a new one. And I was like, I was kind of joking. I was like, who do you plan on using it on? And he had a serious look on his face. He was like, you, how do you feel about that? And then I did tell him, I was like, well, I did have a dream that you stabbed me to death, which I really did. I did have a dream that he stabbed me to death, and in the dream, he did not care. In the dream, he was actually glad, you know, that he had murdered me. So y'all, 4.5 months later, I stopped talking to him for good. He called me up one day, but quickly ended the call. I called him back, but, you know, he had blocked me apparently. And I would still like watch his social media posts because I was interested in his growth. And I just wanted to, you know, watch his journey. But I saw that he had posted a picture of a girl, and he put one of the Chinese girls in my stable. She's a baddie. And then I just felt like he was such a fool, because I was feeling like, oh, he still had a chance with me, but he wanted to block me and spend his time and money on prostitutes, just like the guy I married. So I changed my number, which is something I had done a couple times, but I still gave it to him. But this time I did not give him my number. I changed it because I didn't want him unblocking me and trying to contact me whenever he felt like he wanted to, which is something I know he tried to do. So that was May 2022, and I haven't spoken with him since. And then when I was ready to just, you know, be on my own again in the area I wanted to be in, you know, I applied for an apartment, and I was like, I was approved, and it was easy, and it was the only place I ever applied to. So I don't know. I don't know if there's an eviction on my credit, you know, from when I just had to abruptly leave that apartment. But it was so easy getting into this place. And, you know, my time here is ending. And I applied to another complex. And I told them, hey, I don't know if there's anything on my credit. I mean, it was easy for me to get the place I'm currently in, but I don't know. I just had to up and leave because I was in a scary situation one day. So I don't know if there's anything there. And so I applied, and it's like the next day they emailed me like the welcome letter. So I haven't gotten any rejections from apartment complexes. And I think it's the Lord. And I was also like, I know the Lord wants me here, so he has to provide. And providing he has been.